Welcome to the Be Meaningful podcast, an unrehearsed, unscripted conversation about a real brand in real time, with Brian and Bogey, the founders of Meaningful, an agency that helps brands find a meaningful place in the world. In this episode, Brian and Bogey talk with Stephanie Glickman, who leads earned media and partnerships for global giant Pfizer, where she's building a team focused on influencer marketing. The conversation covers corporate mission, patient engagement, and how a brand remains human in a digitized world.
As you can see, we like to jump right into it. So
yeah, I mean, I your questions aren't all like relevant for me, but I'm happy to take this whatever way you guys are interested.
Yeah, that's great. She's like, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here, honestly. I'm just finally decided to hop on.
I mean,
You're persistent enough. Gosh,
I'm happy.
Way to start off the podcast.
That makes three of us. So.
Oh.
As long as eventually by the end of this we're all rowing in the same direction, then it won't be a laughing stock.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, my gosh, Pfizer, that's a big company.
Yeah, where am I? Where am I in the deep sea? So I'm head of earned media and partnerships at Pfizer. Thanks for having me. This is a new function that never existed within the organization. We had a CMO join us about 2 years ago, create new centralized capabilities for our marketing organization. A lot of new capabilities brought to the company or enhanced from what we already have, but just really about centralizing and making sure we think across the organization about how would we have more effective and more efficient marketing. So that was a big transformation that Pfizer went through. A lot of major changes is for a big company that was used to things being done pretty decentralized across the globe. Wow. So within that, there's a media organization, which is the media growth and performance marketing team, which is where I am sitting, where we are now trying to centralize how we think about our earned media and partnerships. And in particular, where I'm focused is on influencer marketing and content and how we show up in social. Our social listening is informing that. And so I'm building new capabilities, bringing new talent to Pfizer and working across the company, because this is not something you can do on your own in a company like this, but working across the company, across our corporate affairs and PR team, or working across our marketing organization and within the media team itself to think about those standards. How do we show up, and what's the best way to do that? How do we contract with influencers? How do we think about how we measure the impact of influencer campaigns? That's something that we haven't thought about consistently. So I'm building this new thing, which is very cool and very fun, but also very hard when you've got an organization that's really used to operating decentralized and handling things in a different way. So coming in and creating something new requires a change management journey for the company to go through and for my team to go through. I hired a completely new team to Pfizer, all net new. So everyone has come in within the past 3-4 months. So that's a really rare opportunity to be able to bring in your own team and build something from the ground up. So when I say startup, I mean literally startup. Like, we are a startup team, a startup function within this ecosystem of Pfizer, which is certainly not a startup.
That's interesting. You know, it sounds like my daughter for a couple of years was working in a startup within Apple. That was, I think I can say it now without the Apple police coming, but it was actually it was audio production for Siri. They were doing every dialect in the planet.
Very cool.
And so there was a company embedded, but it was very much a startup within this global corporation. So that's pretty interesting.
It's really cool. And it's cool that Pfizer, likes to take these opportunities to innovate and evolve with the times, right? So I feel thankful for being in a company that wants to take that type of risk, right? Because this is a new area, a new function, and we do that all over. But this is an exciting one, and it speaks to how we like to show up in the world. Like, we like to meet our consumers and our customers where they are, and so with that, we have to evolve with the type of the way people are engaging and the way the social media landscape is evolving, we need to evolve with it. So we need to evolve quickly, and we need to have someone who can look at it holistically and see. I'm sorry, my puppy is going to be in and out. So
it's fine. I have a cat winding around my legs right now, so I'm trying not to have my face revealed.
He just like lets himself in and out of the room, so he's going to be doing that the whole time.
Right. Yeah. So. Well, that's cool. So when you say influencer, it would help a lot. I'm sure anybody listening, but even for us to narrow that, because Pfizer is so big, right? Such a vast company. You said consumers and customers. So there's influencers for consumers. There's influencers for your customers, your strategic partners, right? The
physicians, general public,
yeah.
I would say the majority of our marketing in general is in the U.S., and the majority of our influencer marketing is to consumers, and those may be general public. Because if you're not sick, you may need a vaccine, or a patient who may have a condition that is relevant to the medicines that we make. We also reach HCPs as well, but that's a growing area, and that's something that we're still building for the company.
Well, because there's always a question behind the question, right? And so what I was trying to figure out with influencers is, and it's timely, right? Because of the election. So we have people desperately need accurate information, right? They need to get information, and not just opinions. And so there is a media landscape now that you can't rely on for one source of truth, right? So that's a challenge to anybody, but especially in Pfizer's arena. And then I also noticed that you had, when we first started communicating with you, you had just launched, I think, or it was pretty new, Pfizer for All, right? Which is a website that essentially the way, on a quick take, it seemed like it's patient engagement, right? It's trying to get people more engaged in their own health, because that's the trend, right? With virtual health and telehealth and people making their own decisions and having being a stakeholder in their health or in their plan of care, right? And so that for a brief period of time, I was working on the corporate side in the healthcare space up in Portland, and plan of care everything was happening then because it had to, right? Because people were dropping out of their treatments, and there was organizations struggled to really have complete visibility and make sure that people were coming in when they needed to come in and stay on track and everything. So when I think of things like patient engagement, and I think of this truth crisis, right, in media, is that kind of behind the influencer, or is there something, or am I missing?
So influencer marketing is the next generation of, spokespeople, when you think about it, right? Like if you, going back to the dawn of time of communications and marketing campaigns, where you have, a person representing your brand who may have had experience with it or can relate to your audience, maybe in a TV commercial, or, in a news, and, you pitch them for news media. Influencer marketing is no different than that. It's just another way of engaging your consumers. And those are the people that they trust and listen to and follow and get information from. So we take a rigorous approach in finding those influencers that are best aligned with their own personality and their own interests. So it's someone that maybe is already out there speaking about something that's aligned to the brand. Maybe they're a patient. Maybe they are really, relevant to the campaign that we're working on. And they're aligned to the business goals of educating on a certain topic. So it's authentic to them, and it's authentic to us. And we're trying to create the model that finds that nice Venn diagram of authenticity for the influencer, authenticity for the company, brings the right partnership so that they can then speak using their own voice about a matter that's relevant to us. And so for Pfizer for All, for example, we found influencers that were maybe going through the health system themselves and needed something, maybe busy parents who needed to find something for their children or for themselves. They're busy and they don't have time to think about where to book a vaccine appointment, or they don't have time to, maybe they just got COVID and they don't really know what to do about it to get treatment. So this was set up as a frictional site to be able to help consumers go down that journey and take action and be able to navigate through the healthcare system, which is very complicated, as you know, in the US. So we find those voices, those influencers that would really resonate with the campaign platform, but also resonate with their audience and it not feeling like icky, right? We don't want it to seem like, an uncomfortable partnership, but it's really something that really naturally speaks to them and something that they could get behind. Because that's the most important part, right? It's authentically reaching your audience with information where they feel like it makes a lot of sense. So for Pfizer for All, we found.
Are you cultivating people as influencers, or are they already do they already have, a following, and you're looking for a certain critical mass to qualify for that?
Typically what we work with is influencers that already have a following, and there's 3 tiers. There's the macro, the mid and mid-size influencers, and then there's the micro. And you don't necessarily need to go macro, because if you have a really engaged following with a micro influencer,
sure,
their content really resonates with their audience, you can have a huge impact on the type of campaign you work with them on. So we usually have at least micro. So you're not taking someone who is not online at all, engaging, right. Because that would, right. You could, that there is a strategy there, and that's something we may explore in the future. Like maybe there are people that are influencers offline that could benefit from building a following online, and we could, maybe partner from that perspective. But that's not the current priority. The current priority is working with those that are already there, already reaching and engaging with their with the audiences that are relevant for us, and then finding those partnerships. And ideally, what we like to try to do as part of the Center of Excellence I'm building is not just do one and done partnerships, but really maintain those long-term relationships. In fact, I did put a LinkedIn post out you may want to take a look at on some of the best practices. And when we think about influencer marketing and how people are really all trying to figure it out across industries, not just within healthcare. It's so new. How do you measure them? How do you maintain those relationships? And how can we learn? How can Pfizer learn from other industries that are doing it really well?
I like what you just said, because one of the things that has been so frustrating is anytime something is on the vanguard, marketers run to so-called experts. And the truth is everybody's on a learning curve, which is essentially what you just said. You said it's so new, right? And so everybody's on a learning curve. And so you really want to work with people who have their antenna up, who are looking at things, and can make sense of what's happening in real time, as opposed to people who think they've got it figured out. Because even if you do have it figured out, which you probably don't, in 18 months, you're going to be behind the curve anyway. So, it's kind of like we're all on a perpetual learning curve. And so that's I think that's a very healthy perspective, what you just stated, which is cool.
And I like to think of my team as the cultural zeitgeist. We're trying to stay connected to these ever-evolving trends, and it's almost impossible to stay on top of it all. And not every trend you don't necessarily need to do something with everything, right? Like sometimes it will pass, but we're trying to stay on top of it so that we can support our marketers and our cross-functional teams, and thinking about the right way, where's the right place to play and where do you kind of wait and see. So we're creating some of those standards and systems to be able to do that for our teams as well.
While I'm listening, the thought came to mind to throw a curveball in, and that is, so what is the big grand goal? What's the dream for Pfizer? I mean, I could say what's the dream for you, but really, this is all in service of what? What's the vision for Pfizer?
I mean, our delivering breakthroughs that change patient lives. That's our mission our organizational's mission. Like everyone can stand behind that, whether you're someone who's actually making medicine within the lab, or you're someone who's thinking about the packaging of the medicines, or whether you're thinking about the marketing campaign and getting it out, and you're on my team and how we engage more directly with our consumers. So we're all trying to get medicines to patients that need it. It's just a matter of navigating through that process of how you reach people based on their habits changing, how they engage. And so my angle is that, right? Like I come at it from a marketing perspective and more of a social marketing perspective. How do we reach our audiences now in a really, really fragmented digital landscape where they're consuming content daily and they're scrolling through, and it's just almost impossible to break through. I mean, I'm sure you also this morning were probably on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, whatever your poison is, where you play and you probably were fed a bunch of information, some of which you may have skipped, some of which you consumed. And so you've got to find that way, like right away, to grab your audience with important information so that they stay connected and engaged with you as a brand. And then you can ultimately get them to the care that they need.
Yeah. So one of the tensions that marketers have to deal with, right, when it comes to social media is that push, which is kind of the convention, really doesn't work, right? That pull, like you said, in a fragmented media landscape, people have to pull you in, right? Everybody's a market of one times hundreds of millions, right? And so that's how you get your reach, is when people pull you in, which essentially means brands have to be content, right? There has to be some value there, whether, and then you can get into, this idea of social currency and all that, but and some of that it's maybe a little cynical. Social currency is how does it make me look? Does it make me look funny, smart, like I'm in the know, I'm on the vanguard, whatever. And I think there's probably some truth to that, but I don't think everybody is quite that cynical in their kind of automatic thought process. I think a lot of people are they like stuff, and when you like something, you could say joy wants to be shared. And so whatever type of joy that is, whether it's just a little chuckle, a laugh, a raised eyebrow, something, you could call that delight, right? In corporate speak, they like to use that word. But that wants to be shared to be fully consummated, right? You want to share it. It's because when you experience something in life that you like, you almost have an involuntary response to turn to a person next to you and say, isn't that amazing? And if no one's there, it's kind of not complete, right? And so you take a picture, and then the first thing you say while you're showing the picture, well, it doesn't really capture how it really was amazing, But so I think that idea, right, that what you're posting, and not just posting, right? You want to comment on things too, right? You want to have your ear to the ground and get into conversations, right? Like become a voice at the table, right, on things. And so that's interesting. So
content is it's interesting, and that's another part of my team I'm building is something we're referring to as the content engine, in thinking about content and how you reach people based on what they're searching for. So there's data-driven approaches to this too. Like it's not just putting content out there because you think it's good, but it's also because you know that people are hungry for information around a particular thing. And so you're then creating the content to respond back to. So that's a very brand new piece that I'm in the final processes of hiring someone for. But that's another part of the story, because you can't just assume that because you found a great influencer and because you put the content out there that people are going to love it. Like people are dynamic. And so finding ways to respond to what they're interested in and being a little bit more agile in the content we create, that is another muscle I'm trying to help us build at Pfizer. More like opportunistic is the story. And a lot of companies do this really well in other industries, right? Like you're in social listening, you're in your brand watch or whatever platform you use, and you're seeing the trend, you're seeing people comment, and then you quickly respond and create some content that really reacts to that and engage, and therefore you're really engaging. And maybe you're not commenting directly on the thing, but you are using that as inspiration to then put content out there because it's what people are saying. So I'm trying to build that wheel of like listening, social, creating the content, finding the influencers that are relevant to the content, and then learning from that. And that wheel kind of goes around and around. So, but we are in such the early days. 3 or 4 months old so far.
Yeah, that's great, because I was thinking also how part of how you get your relevance is commenting on things that are happening, right? It's the context, right? So something happens, like textbook example, COVID. Nobody, oh my God, that happened. But to be able to speak to that, to be able to speak to, you don't want to get tangled up in political stuff, but to speak to what's happening, in America right now with the politics and the change of administrations, just to speak to those things, because those issues didn't exist, whether it was a month ago or a year ago or whatever, those issues didn't exist. Now they do. So that's part of where you get your context too. And one of the things that we being, Meaningful, one of the things that we've been looking at lately and beginning to see that it is not just a thing, but it may be the thing, is trust. This idea of trust. I mean, it's funny how, I'm sure you've experienced it. Once something is on your radar, right, you see it popping up everywhere. Like, because it's in your mind, right? And so everywhere you start to see it pop up, and it's not like nobody's thought of trust before. I mean, Covey's got a whole cottage industry on it and everything, but that's more corporate culture, more like work, like organizational philosophy about trust. But this is about from a consumer, and I think that we all talk about trust, but just like value, it's not something it's not an attribute of a brand. It's a conclusion that a customer gets to make, right? That you are trustworthy, you are quality, you care, right? Those are things everybody tries to say. A bank will say, we care about you. And it's like, no, you don't. You just hit me with a fee. No, you don't. So that idea of trust is interesting. And especially in the space of pharmaceuticals and breakthroughs in science and medicine for people, and to this is going to help you with your life. Trust is so important. And really I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because for us, we would say that trust is the first transaction, right? Even before a click or a credit card, right? I have to trust you with my time. Yeah, just before a click, I trust you with my time. Well, how does that transaction happen before I click? Because that's a second transaction, right? And so that's the thing we're thinking about, is this idea of trust. I'd love to hear, I don't know, any thoughts that come to mind. I mean, this is all like kind of on the fly.
Sure. I mean, I think we're at Pfizer, we're constantly thinking about that, because the pharmaceutical industry, just in and of itself, has an uphill battle in their perception with consumers. It's a complicated system. It's a complicated health system. There's a lot of different players. And so there's trust of Pfizer, the brand, Uber Pfizer, the brand. And then there's also trust in the products that we make, the medicines that we make, and your own personal experience. And so that is something that we're evaluating, is like, how has the perception of Pfizer, Uber Pfizer, compared to how people experience our medicines individually? And then from a marketing perspective, what's the strategy in sort of leading with Pfizer, like Pfizer vaccines versus, saying the individual brand name. So it's something that we're thinking about all the time. I mean, we're deeply focused on our customers and deeply focused on our consumers, and doing all of the appropriate things in order to reach them in the most meaningful way, and listening to them and hearing what they have to say. But it's something that you have to like constantly evolve and think about, because how people respond to your brand, then you need to adapt and evolve as well. So I think trust is a complicated space. And I think it's something that you've got people from a corporate affairs perspective really thinking about how we show up in the ecosystem. You've got folks thinking about that from like how we make our medicines in the labs. Like high quality, high standards, like all of that. And so then it's about, how do you communicate that? How do you make sure that people understand there are people behind this huge organization? There are people that care meaningfully about patients and care meaningfully. And many of them are patients themselves and have their own loved ones experiencing the healthcare system. So it's, I feel personally like you trust people, I think you trust people that you know personally. And it's sometimes hard when you're a big organization to know them personally, but there are the people that are communicating more directly with our consumers. There's our sales force that are communicating more directly with our HCPs. There's our policymaker team communicating directly with policymaking teams. So it's like getting to know the individuals behind Pfizer so you can trust the people. The people are great. The people really care, and we really stand by our values in bringing the best quality and the best medicines to patients that need it.
So it's cool what you were saying, because it's one of the things a lot of corporations resist doing is looking human. I mean, all a corporation is a community of humans. But then that gets buried under this artifice, this front, this projection the company wants to make, and you don't veer from that. Yet, part of what makes you human is the conflicts or struggles, the challenges, the dreams that you have within the organization, right? Like a master marketer, you can go back, you can Google, like Howard Gossage back in the 50s, 60s, was just amazing, because he found, it's just true in any story, any narrative, that, right, there's a protagonist with this lofty goal, this noble dream, this objective, right, which is inherently has value, right? And yet there's an antagonist. There's something in the way, right? Something blocking that, the realization of that. And so there's conflict that has to be overcome in order to achieve the goal, right? And that's any brand. You want to try to find what's that story within the brand, right? And so it's the conflict is part of what makes you human. It's part of what gets people hooked to your story. It's part of what gets them to root for you, right? Because conflict is what makes you human. It makes you like the people you're talking to, right? And so that, I think that can engender trust, because you're being honest. And, being honest seems like a default, but we live in the age of transparency. I mean, that's what the internet ushered in. And that's why trust is at a historical low right now. I mean, it's lower than it's ever been. And I think that's because
it's hard when you're in a regulated industry, of course, right? So I feel like in other industries, you can have a lot more freedom to be vocal around all different types of things and be more present as anyone, right? At any level, representing your brand and representing your business. For an organization like Pfizer, so big, first of all, and second, in a really regulated industry, we have you have to work, you have to be very cautious about that. So you got to find, how can you, that's kind of my mantra, is how can we, because I'm trying to find the ways through, even within a regulated industry, even within a pharmaceutical company, how can we really be engaging for our consumers, and how can we show up authentically, and how can we put voices to the work that we're putting out there, because we're not just a corporation, to your point, we are people behind it. So we're thinking about that from a content strategy as well.
Yeah. And when I say conflicts, I'm not thinking, like flaws or mistakes or anything. I'm thinking, which of course that would be really dangerous in pharmaceutical, but I'm thinking about just the challenges to achieve your goal, right? Like to find breakthroughs that improve people's lives. Like, what are the challenges for that? Like a lot of people don't realize the enormous investment of resource, time, and money in bringing things to market. Like a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, I for a nanosecond worked on Covance, which is a big, clinical trial place, and trying in some of the work I was doing, it was trying to convey why these people work in windowless rooms, looking into worlds you can't see with the human eye, like, or just eat lunch out of vending machines, long days, year after year after year. They do it to achieve that dream, right? To find the cure, to find the breakthrough, and it was before COVID that I was doing that. And one of the things that I loved was the impression of the goggles or the glasses, where they left. And since COVID, that became like almost an icon, for the health industry that was working so hard. But I think, I guess what I'm getting at is that people are always trying to figure out, like, they're always holding back a little bit and measuring, engaging, and what they're trying to get to the bottom of, and they maybe don't even realize they're doing this analytically, but they're trying to figure out, what is your intention? And that's kind of part of the trust thing. What is your intention? And we know, because we've had 50 years of shareholder capitalism and everything's driven by profit, and certainly profit is good and it's necessary, but if profit is the goal, as Milton Friedman said, then everything else is secondary. And then that's where people start to think. So really being able to navigate those concepts so that people really start to believe that you care and that you have their best intentions at heart, And I think that's the being human. That's the humanizing the brand, so that I see reflected in you the same values that I hold. That's where that's where bonding happens, right? Is on shared values, right? It's two people looking out at the same thing, as opposed to, face-to-face relationship.
So our corporate values are excellence, courage, equity, and joy, which I think really reflects the type of work that we're trying to do and how we think about it. Nowhere in there is there anything referencing, profit. It's not about that. It's about delivering with excellence for our patients. It's having the courage to speak up when we need to. It is equity, like thinking of all of the different people that we're touching and all the diverse perspectives and all the diverse potential patients that you may be reaching. And joy is having fun along the way and taking pride in the work that we do and feeling really great about it and recognizing each other. So those are obviously our internal values, but they speak to how we then ultimately want to show up externally as a company.
Sure.
And I will say that the process of delivering a medicine to the market, like I said before, we are a huge organization that includes from lab to patient, right? So you are developing a medicine for years, and there's a lot of time and resources that must go into that. And then ultimately you're bringing it to market and you're obviously, selling that medicine, and then the profits go back to then being able to research more. So it's sort of cyclical. You can't make medicine without having the funding to be able to do that. So it's a cyclical process, but it's all in service of getting patients the medicines that they need, and bringing those to bear.
Yeah. And I think the average consumer just doesn't really understand the enormous cost and timeline of bringing something to market, They just don't. And so, part of that is too, it's interesting, right? Like you could watch a Nova program on bringing something to market and you'd watch the whole thing because it's inherently interesting. It's just people don't know. They just don't know really, what it takes.
Let me ask you one last question before we wrap this up, because you've been amazing, Stephanie. So I appreciate, again, you coming on. Is there any questions you'd ask us? If I were to turn the table on you and be like, you're sitting in front of a couple ad guys, we have enough experience in the industry to understand, influencer marketing, the traditional channels, and kind of how the whole world works. And that, any questions for us that you'd want to ask?
What do you think breaks through? What do you think really breaks through when you think about content and marketing campaigns that really capture people's attention and drive action? Like, what is it in your mind that really breaks through?
Well, first of all, I think it's connected, has context, right? It's something very current. It resonates with something that everybody is experiencing in their life at the moment. So context, that relevance that comes from context, I think gives it a lot of energy. And then I think when I say clarity, it's the ability to take what might have many facets or moving pieces, and you're able to, create clarity out of this. Because a lot of people experience life in a very visceral, ambient way. Right? Like I feel worn out. I feel like I never get enough done. I feel like everything's coming at me. I feel like, right. It's all, we experience life viscerally first and foremost. And then we cognitively try to process what we just experienced. And the way we're built, it's always that sequence. You never think about something first. You always experience it and then process what you just experienced. And so I think there's a lot of power if, you can speak to what people are experiencing and bring clarity to it. And that sounds serious. I guess it doesn't always have to be in terms of the emotional palette. It has to be serious. But I think those two things, that's where it jumps out and people go like, that there's value in that, right? They don't say that, but they lean into it because they're like, oh, that just helped. And yeah. What do you think, Bogey?
I think, and feel free to let me know if I'm cutting off, but I think in this age of I call it the generative age, right? Where we're now going into this world where more and more is being generated. It's AI, whatever, language models, you can generate, 1,800 pages worth of content in a single keystroke. The thing that's going to really help you stand out is, I think, being real. I think that, that's a very loaded word in itself, but I think humans are going to crave something that's real and not generated. Yeah. And you see that now with Photoshop. You see all this stuff. You see this kind of backlash on perfection. And that's, again, back to what Brian said earlier. It's a little bit more tricky when it comes to health, because with health, you want perfection. You really do. And so, I don't know. I think for Pfizer, I'd say one of the things that is kind of untapped, the opportunity, and we've talked about this on the episode, which is just exciting, is really to lean into the level of work it takes to get the breakthroughs. Breakthroughs don't just happen. It's not just magic. Right. Like OpenAI, what was it? They started, and someone can probably correct me on this, but they started in 2017? OpenAI has been doing this for a very long time, and they finally got, it's the same thing. Like when it comes to these breakthroughs, it takes a lot of human effort, and then at some point it takes a bit of luck, and to be able to kind of say that. Yeah. It takes qualities that we universally admire, right? It takes vision. Yeah. It takes perseverance, right? It takes resilience, because you think you had it and it didn't work, right? 1,000 Petri dishes, none react, and then one reacts, and it is an emotional roller coaster of the human spirit, and I think that is rich, and I also would say to not confuse the perfection. Because we talked about perfect. Somebody, I think Bogey used the word, that perfection of your product with the perfection of the company. The company doesn't, have to be perfect. Your product can be, but your product is just a medium for an idea. And if your idea is breakthroughs that improve people's lives, what does that require?
It requires a pathfinder spirit. It requires eternal optimism. It requires all these character attributes that have to be in your company culture, so that your company can be personalized. People can see it and have an emotional. That's all branding is an emotional response when you see or hear a company's name or logo. It's having an emotional response, and so I think that is powerful when you give your organization permission to share your hopes, your dreams, your challenges. That's why I was going back earlier, not so much your mistakes, but the things that make you human. And I think the Bogey's point, and that's a huge one I keep forgetting, is like, that is going to be a bigger deal. The more generative AI is present in our lives, and we see it in the Amazon effect, right? The more digitized and virtual our experiences become, the more consumers crave some human touch, right? That high tech, high touch thing. So, I think, and it's exciting when you think of a company the size of Pfizer, to be concerned about human attributes and being seen as people.
You want people to see themselves in your content.
That's it.
Right?
That's the whole thing. Yep.
So that's important as we think about how we put our content out there. Like, are we diverse with our perspectives? Are we really authentic and personal and relatable? Right. So these are the attributes that we're bringing to the center of excellence in how we think about reaching our audiences.
Yeah, because even behind a huge global brand, that was built by people.
It was.
Yeah, it wasn't built by
years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't built by a machine. It was built by a human and a community of humans. And I think that's huge in the space you guys work in, is to because even when you were saying like people want to see themselves reflected, I mean banks are doing that. I mean, the banking category has become so transactional, largely because of online banking and apps and fintech, right? It's become so transactional, and so banks are like, they're trying to reflect their audience in their content, but the people seeing the content know it's just window dressing. You're trying to look like you like me, but you just want my deposit. You just want my money. And so I think it's not just mimicking, but actually sharing the same heart and sharing the same values, and I think that's where connection is made, over values, not over likeness.
But that's just the first part. That's just the connection, right? But then it's a relationship at the end of the day, right? And it's an overused word in marketing, of course. But anyways, we could talk about this all day.
But I mean, listen, I've had 8 years here. I've seen lots of different angles of Pfizer because I've had what we call a zigzag journey. So I've had a lot of different career opportunities here, because that's the benefit of this organization is the opportunities to grow. And I will say we all stand by these values, and that's what's kept me here. Like, it's just a really great place to work, and people are really caring about the people that they're trying to serve with the medicines that we're bringing. So now, just from this influencer marketing perspective, I can really represent that more externally.
Cool.
That's exciting.
Well, that's great.
That's exciting.
It's been great.